Hello, I'm Stormwind Studios instructor and Sybex author, William Panek. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a virtual machine and install Windows Server 2016 into that virtual environment. So as you can see, we already have Hyoper-V up and running. So what we're going to do is we are going to build a new virtual machine for the environment, and then we're going to do the actual 2016 installation. So to build a brand new virtual machine, I'm going to click over on the right hand side under Actions, and I'm actually going to say New Virtual Machine. And at that point, the virtual machine wizard appears. Now, this is real simple if you've never done this before. Literally, you're just going to walk through the wizard and answer the questions and put in the settings that you want to specify. So the first thing it's going to ask us is, what do we want to name this virtual machine? Now, this name is not the name of the machine itself. Meaning, when you go into Windows Server 2016, this will not be the computer name. This is the actual name that you put in so that you can actually recognize it inside of the Hyoper-V server, so you know which virtual machine you're dealing with. So we're going to go ahead and just say that this is our Windows Server 2016 install. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to store our files to a different location. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put them, I have a location set up on my H drive, and I'm just going to say new folder, and I'm going to say it's Server 2016. And this is where I'm going to store all of my files. Now, it's a good idea to actually put your virtual files into its own directory, partition, because this way, if you ever have to go back and manipulate the files, if you have to make changes, back them up, you know exactly which directory or which partition you need to back up. So it's not a bad idea. Plus also, down the road, if you decide that you don't want to use this virtual machine anymore, you're just using it for testing purposes or for demonstration purposes, you know exactly what directory you need to go in and delete after you removed the virtual machine. So it's good to keep it in its own separate location. So the next question it's going to ask us is, which generation of virtual machine do we want to use? Now, generation 1 was the virtual machine that Hyoper-V 2008 started using. It didn't have a lot of features, a lot of the functionality that you get today. With generation 2, you get all kinds of new features, including your UEFI firmware, secure boot. You get all of the newest features of Windows. So you're going to want to pick generation 2. The only time today that I stick with generation 1 systems is if I'm installing, for example, Linux. On this virtual server, I have Kali Linux, I have Parrot Linux. Both of those were installed under generation 1 because they can't handle the generation 2 functionality of Hyoper-V. So, but since we're going to be installing Windows Server as our client on this guest system, it's going to easily handle all of the features under generation 2. So we're going to choose generation 2, and then it's going to ask us how much RAM we want to put in. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to just make it 16 gigs. Now, here there's a spot where you can use dynamic memory. What dynamic memory does is it only uses the amount of RAM that's required at the time this virtual machine is running. So for example, if I set it so that this virtual machine is going to use 16 gigs of RAM, but at the time it's running, it's only using 4 gigs of RAM. That's all the system will take. So dynamic memory can actually save you on RAM because it only uses the RAM up to the 16 gigs, up to what you assigned it. This is an excellent option, but one thing I would recommend is I normally don't choose this option when I'm first doing an install, because I've run into times where during the installation process of Windows Server, it's not using much RAM at all. And when we hit the screen where the system looks for minimum requirements, it may actually give us an error telling us that we don't have enough RAM, because dynamic memory is only using such a small piece of RAM for the Windows setup. So this is something that you can go back in afterwards and change in the settings of the virtual machine after it's created. So dynamic memory is excellent because, again, it only uses the amount of RAM that the system's using as it's running. But I would set that option after you do your install. So we're going to go ahead and just say next. And then it's going to ask us which network adapter are we going to use. Now in Hyoper-V, you have to set up your network adapters as switches. So I've set mine up and I'm going to use my second network adapter, my virtual switch, but I named it Ethernet 2 so I know exactly what card I'm connecting it to. So you build your virtual switches right here on the right hand side where my mouse is going. You can actually see where it says Virtual Switch Manager. You set up your network adapters inside the Virtual Switch Manager. After they're set up, then you start building your virtual machines. So I already have my network adapters set up as virtual switches. So I'm just going to say next. And at this point, it's going to ask us if we want to create a hard drive. Now, because we're going to be doing a brand new install, we don't have a hard drive at this time. If I already had a Windows Server virtual hard drive built that I wanted to use on this system, I could actually tell it use an existing hard drive and then point it to the hard drive that's already built. But since we're going to be installing 2016 onto this box for the first time, I'm going to have it build its own virtual hard drive. And for this example, 128 gigs, it's more than enough just for this because we're just going to install 2016 and nothing else. So I'm going to tell it to install. It's going to put it right in our Server 2016 folder that we created. So I'm just going to say next. And then it's going to ask me, where am I going to get my installation files from? So I'm going to actually tell it to use an ISO disk that I already have installed. So I already have a 2016 ISO image. So I'm going to tell it to use this image. And the ISO, all the ISO is it's the actual installation files. So we're going to tell Windows, use this ISO as my installation. Now, for any of you that are just getting into working with server, you can actually go out to Microsoft.com and you can go out to, they have evaluation copies that you can download, and they'll let you use these copies for 180 days. They're full running copies, so it gives you a chance to learn and play on the system. So get yourself, and they're going to give it to you in an ISO format. So go out to Microsoft, get yourself a copy 2016 or 2019, whatever you want to be using. Download a copy of the ISO, put it into a virtual machine, and then you can literally start playing with the operating system and see if it's something you like before your company makes the investment. So I'm going to point it to the 2016 ISO, and that's going to be it. And at this point, we're going to say finished. Now, it's going to create the virtual machine, but there's still no operating system on the box. So what we got to do is we got to kick off the installation just like we would on any install. We're going to start up this virtual machine, and when we start up this virtual machine, it's going to tell us to hit any key to actually do an installation, to install off the DVD. It's going to see the ISO files as a DVD drive. So what you want to do is open up the virtual machine first, because this can be a very fast window that goes by. As soon as the window is open, go under Action and say Start. Now, as soon as we hit Start, watch for the actual message that actually will tell you hit any key to install from the DVD. So we're going to hit Start. There's our message. I hit the Enter key. And at that point, I'm going to just go into full screen mode. At this point, we're now going to do an installation of Windows Server 2016. So the first screen, it's going to ask us what our language is, what our time is, and what the keyboard is. Now, we're in the United States, so I'm going to leave all of these settings as is. If you need to make changes, go ahead and make them at this time, and you can set up for whatever language or keyboard style that you have. So I'm going to say next. Now, at this screen, you have two options. You can actually install the brand new operating system, which we're going to do. But if you have a 2016 server that's having some issues and you need to repair the server or bring back maybe some of the original files because a file got corrupt, here's the spot where you would actually repair your computer. You would click on this, it would take you down the repair route, and at that point you could repair a 2016 server. Again, since this is going to be a brand new install, we're just going to say install now. Now, by the way, I apologize. I'm trying to keep my voice down a little bit. On a lot of my YouTube videos, a lot of people are always asking why I'm yelling during the videos. I don't mean to, so if I'm loud, I apologize. I am deaf completely on one side, and I only have a little bit of hearing on my other side, so sometimes I'm louder than I mean to be. So I'm trying to actually keep my voice level down, but if it's a little loud and you have to turn down your volume, again, I apologize. I'm trying my best to actually not be louder than I normally am during these videos. So at this screen here, it's going to ask you about putting in your product key where you can activate Windows. Now, if you've downloaded a copy from Microsoft and you want to use it as an eval copy, or you got a copy from Microsoft or from a vendor and they gave you a product key, you can feel free to put the key in at this point. If you don't have a key, it's okay. The installation is going to continue on. All you're going to do is you're going to say, I don't have a product key. And what it's going to do is it's going to still set this system up. Except that it's going to set it up in an eval environment, and you're going to have a timer. And basically, it's going to give you about 180 days to either get a key into this box, or it's going to stop working at that point. So it gives you more than enough time to learn and play with the system. Now, at this screen, it's going to ask you if you want to install 2 different versions of server. And each one comes with its own setup. You have Windows 2016 Standard. Then you have, with the desktop, 2016 Datacenter, and with the desktop. All right, we're going to install in this presentation Datacenter. Now, one of the major differences between Standard and Datacenter, there are some differences, but the biggest difference is the number of virtual machines that can be loaded onto the system based on the license that you purchased. So that's one of the biggest choices on why you're going to go over one really over the other. But what's the difference between the version and the desktop experience? Well, on previous versions of Microsoft, when they installed Server, there was a version they had called Server Core. And Server Core doesn't have a GUI. A GUI is the actual desktop Windows environment where you have your start button. That's your GUI. Before 2016, Microsoft used to actually say install Standard and then install Standard Server Core. So they actually told you basically it was Server Core. They've changed that. Now, the version that doesn't say desktop experience, okay, these 2 versions right here, these are the Server Core versions. If you want to have a desktop and you want to have a start button and you want to be able to use a graphical user interface, you got to make sure you install the one with the desktop experience. That's the actual GUI environment. So we're going to install 2016 Datacenter and we're going to install it with the GUI. So we're going to put the desktop experience. So we're going to say next. It's going to have us go through the actual license terms. So at this point, you would want to go through, read the license terms. You know, if you've never done it, you know, it's not something that we normally do every single time. But if you get a chance, especially, one late night where you can't sleep, excellent thing to read. Okay, it's better than Unison. So go ahead, go through the license agreement. Once you agree to the license agreement, you click on this, I accept it, you say next. Then it's going to ask you, are we doing an upgrade from a previous version, or is this going to be basically a new install, a custom install? So we're going to choose custom because this is a brand new system. Now, as you noticed, we set up a virtual hard drive during the installation of the Hyoper-V environment when we actually set up the virtual machine. And we told it to use 127 gigs as our hard drive. Now, that hard drive, believe it or not, is just a file. Hyoper-V uses files, but it makes those files run as an operating system. The great thing is, these systems work exactly the same as a physical machine. Once I finish setting this up, I can literally put Active Directory on this box, DNS, whatever I want to put on this box, and it's going to run on my network just like every other server. It's going to run just like every other physical server. It has no idea really that it's virtualized. So it sees that little 127 gigabyte file that we created as a hard drive. So I'm going to basically just click new so you can see. I'm going to apply the entire 127 gigs. But Microsoft automatically creates some partitions for system files. And that's okay. So as you'll see in a second, there are some small areas, 450 megs, 99 megs, the system uses for recovery and system files. But our primary partition is right here, 126 gigs. That's what we're going to go ahead, and that's where we're going to install Windows. Now at this point, you could just say next, and it will start. But I'm kind of old school a little bit. I still, just because the ways I always done it, I always format it first. Believe it or not, you don't need to. If you click next, it's automatically going to format it anyway. One final thing. If you get to this screen and it doesn't see your hard drive, if maybe you're loading your hard drive onto a disk that Hyoper-V just isn't recognizing, and you need to load drivers into this environment so the virtual machine can recognize the hard drive you set up, here's where you would go in and load your drivers. So if for some reason you get to this screen and you can't see your virtual hard drive, you may have stuck your virtual hard drive onto a third-party type system, or maybe a SCSI device, and it needs drivers loaded into Windows so that it can see that device. This is the point where you would load those drivers. But since we're loading this right onto a Hyoper-V server, it created and saw the virtual hard drive we set up. At that point, we're going to say next. We're going to make sure we're on the primary. We're going to say next, and the installation is going to kick off. Now, at this point of the video, this is where you would actually cue up the Jeopardy music, and it's not going to actually take really, really long, because in a virtual environment, one of the advantages that we have a lot of times over physical servers is in the virtual environment, it actually will operate much faster. I'll give you an example while this is finishing up. I had a physical server that I used in a company where I was an IT director. When I would do a reboot on that server, it would take about 15 minutes to physically reboot the system. I took that machine and turned it into a virtual machine. Okay, at the time I used a piece of software called P2V. P meaning physical, to virtual. It allows you to take a physical machine and turn it into a virtual machine. I used P2V. I turned the physical machine into a virtual machine. When I would reboot the virtual machine, the reboot on the virtual machine would be about a minute and a half for the system to actually shut down and reboot, compared to the actual 15 minutes that it took on the physical device. So there's a lot of advantages to using virtual machines. Less hardware, you don't need as big of a server room because you can have less servers that actually host more virtual environments. So now, instead of having 16 physical servers, I can have 4 physical servers, and each one of those physical servers is going to host 4 virtual machines. So I'm still going to have my 16 servers, except they're all going to be on 4 virtual servers now. So it's less on heating, cooling, electricity. There's a lot of advantages to using virtualization. All right. So we're at this point almost at 50% of the install already. So I'm going to go ahead and put you back on the screen. I'll take myself off, and we're going to go ahead and let it finish up. And as soon as it finishes, we'll go ahead and reboot the system. And at that point, we'll go ahead and finish the install. You'll actually see the rest of the installation. Now, if I was still making these videos with a great product called Camtasia Studios, which I just happen not to be, I could pause the video and then just restart it when it hit 100%. But unfortunately, with the software I'm using now, if I stop the video, it literally stops the video, and if I restart it, it creates another whole video. So we're going to just let this run. If you are watching this online on YouTube, you can literally at this point just kind of move your mouse along the bottom, fast forward until you hit the point where we're at 100%, and we'll continue there. Now, Windows Server 2016 is an excellent operating system. As a matter of fact, 2019, and with the release coming out soon of 2022, they are built on top of the 2016 system. As a matter of fact, on 2019 and 2022, the highest function levels that you can raise your domain and forest is 2016. That's as high as you can go, because they're still built on the 2016 system. 2019 and 2022 have a lot of new tools on top of 2016 that allow your network easier connection to Azure, to the cloud. So if you are looking at going into using an on-site network and joining it into the cloud, then 2019, 2022 might be a good way to go. But if you're not going to be worried about putting your network onto Azure or any version of the cloud, 2016 is pretty much as high as you need to go. You're not going to really need to go any higher than that, because 2019 and 2022 are pretty much built right on those systems. So, all right. Trying to install as much as I can to help you out here. We're at almost 90%. So, now, for a lot of you that have contacted me who have purchased one of my server books, Sybex, who is owned by Wiley, they've actually removed a lot of the videos that came with the book. You used to be able to log into their website and you could watch a lot of these videos. Unfortunately, they removed some of these videos from their website because, 2016, the actual exams have been retired. So that's why I'm creating this video, so that if you do have a copy of the book, you can actually see how it's done. But all of these steps, everything I've done on doing the installation of 2016 is exactly how it is in the book. So if you go to the very first chapter of installing Windows, there is an exercise, and that exercise will actually be installing Windows Server, and it's going to show you basically everything that we did. So you can install it onto a regular machine, a full server, or you can set it up into a virtual environment. So it's completely up to you. The server's going to run, all the labs are going to run, the exercises, everything's going to run exactly the same way. So it really doesn't matter which way you install this. I think it would be better to install it in a Hyoper-V. Now, for all of you that are running Windows 10, if you have Windows 10 Pro, Windows 10 Enterprise, if your system can handle virtualization, if your motherboard can handle virtualization, Windows 10 comes with Hyoper-V. It's a scaled down version, but you basically set it up the exact same way I just showed you. So if you are running Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Enterprise and your system can handle virtualization, you can install Hyoper-V, load 2016 into a Hyoper-V environment, and you can do all of this right on top of your Windows 10 box. So at this point, it's going to ask us for our password. So I'm going to go ahead and put in an administrative password. Not going to make it real long because, again, this is just going to be for this demo. And then at that point, I'm going to say finished. And that's it. At this point, this system is actually installed. And it's installed into Hyoper-V. So it's now just another virtual machine that we're running. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a Control-Alt-Delete. Let me put in my password that I just created. And as soon as it finishes logging in, you can now start playing with and using Windows Server 2016. And again, this is the Datacenter version and it's the desktop version. So as you can see, we actually have a desktop. So at that point, this pops up asking you about, do you want to join this network to, to a network so other machines can see it? That's what this is asking. Are you going to basically allow other machines to connect and use this server? So if you're planning on allowing other machines to discover this server, if you want to use this server for sharing files, and at that point you're going to want to make sure you say yes. All right, so that this way it knows that it's okay if as long as you go in and set up your permissions and other machines and people, other users have access to this box. At least now it's set up so this box can be recognized by other systems. So that's it. That is the actual installation of Windows Server 2016. Server Manager will come up. So if you want, you can automatically start installing stuff onto this. Now, one of the things real quick before I wrap this video up, one of the things that I do is I go in under Manage and I go to Server Manager Properties and I actually stop Server Manager from loading right here. Do not start Server Manager on logon. Server Manager is great and I love to use it. Besides PowerShell, it's a main way that I do a lot of my installations. But I don't want to see it every single time I have to log into a server. So that's something that you might want to decide that you want to just stop from automatically loading. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video on installing Windows Server 2016 Datacenter into a Hyoper-V environment. I am Stormwind Studios instructor and Sybex author, William Panek. I hope all of you have an absolutely terrific day, and I hope to see you in one of my classes real soon. Thanks for watching.